Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Healership Path. I'm Rita Hickman, shiatsu massage therapist and body-mind expert, and I do these morning videos, live streams, Monday through Friday, starting about between 8:15 and 8:30 every day. And it's designed to help people who want to heal themselves or want to help the people they love heal or want to start some sort of healing practice. It helps them learn how we heal, and it helps us stay on track so that we can really do the best job and be present for people at all times. So today's topic is, how do we trigger? What is triggering all about? So a brief explanation of triggering is when we have an emotion that we didn't feel that at the time. Let's say you were going along in your life and you got into a car accident, and because you were in the car accident, you were under a certain level of stress. You were under a certain level of things need to be done. There's no time to just sit there and sort of process through what just happened to you. So you have to take what happened and you have to compartmentalize it. And because it feels so uncomfortable, our body, when we compartmentalize something, it tends to ignore it. We call it taking our consciousness out of what we're feeling. So we stop paying attention to it, so we stop feeling it. And our body narrows the blood vessels so the emotion chemicals don't circulate around our body. And our body does whatever it has to kind of physically cut itself off from whatever emotion that we're feeling. So it can happen when we deal with trauma. It can happen if it's something that's just really uncomfortable for us. It's where we detach and we almost physically detach from the part of us that feels so painful or in so much hurt. So when we do that, when we think that we're just ignoring something or avoiding something, our body really does cut it off. It stops sending lymph, it stops sending nervous system signals, it stops sending everything that it needs to heal and repair that part of our body and to circulate those emotions around our body. We don't want to feel them, and so our body puts them someplace. And this can turn into a body memory where it's something that happened, but it ended up being put in a box, and the box got put on a shelf, and it never got dealt with again. And most people think that stuff is mental, but it's very physical too. So we have a lot of body memories that we haven't processed through. And that body memory stays stuck in a loop, almost like a time vortex. And when we have an emotion is actually chemicals that our body releases to give us a felt sense so that we feel something. So that felt sense, those chemicals then get absorbed somewhere. We release them. Normally we would feel them, we would drink water, we would sweat it out, we'd pee it out, we'd cry it out. Something would happen so that those antibodies, so that those chemicals, those emotions didn't stay in our body, so that we got rid of them. They came, we released them, and we flushed them out. But when we detach, when we compartmentalize something that happened to us, then that normal process doesn't happen. And so all of those emotional chemicals, they have to be put somewhere. They get reabsorbed somewhere. And they can end up in our organs. They can end up in our cells. They can end up places that we certainly don't expect. But usually it's at the place where we're feeling it most. So if we if something happened and we felt it in our heart and we didn't want to feel it in our heart, then we would cut ourselves off physically from feeling our heart. And those chemicals would stay there. Now, when chemicals stay in a part of our body, when they're absorbed, they start to have a negative side effect on our body, especially if we keep it compartmentalized, if we keep our consciousness out of that, if we don't think about it or feel it. It causes inflammation. So it's almost like holding a toxin. It's almost like, if you are dairy intolerant and you ate dairy or gluten, or you had mercury, or you had too much iron as a kid, something like that. It starts to cause inflammation in our body, in that place where we're holding it. And because it doesn't flush out, it stays there, and it keeps irritating it and keeps irritating it. And because that area doesn't have very good circulation, what happens is all that cellular waste of that area, of those cells that live there, those start to build up. So now what was just maybe a minor annoyance or a frustration or a pain or a hurt that we were ignoring now starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because that cellular waste builds up. It needs to take up more and more room. And that hurt place in us, when it started out very small, now it starts to grow and take up more and more room. And actually we become more and more sensitive to that part of our body and to anything that makes us think of that part of our body. We become more sensitive to it, so then we avoid it even more. We detach even more, disconnect even more. And so that's how a small problem becomes a big problem. And then we'll be wandering around life doing our thing, and then something, either physically, mentally, or emotionally, will activate that part of our body where all those chemicals are being stored. And suddenly, it's like poking an angry bear. It's been sitting and waiting, and when you poke it, it releases all of those chemicals back out into your body again. And that's how we can create healing crises for people if we're not careful. If we push too much of those chemicals back into somebody's system, then it overloads it. And that's when you get sick, you get flu-like symptoms, you get cold symptoms. Many times when I work with people, they will get congestion. Because if I'm working on old areas where those chemicals are being stored, I'm physically and manually pushing them back into their system. And the increased circulation will cause congestion, but so will the fact that I'm putting something that the body's kind of like, what are you doing? What is this? What's going on? That will create congestion in their system as well. So many times when I work with people, they'll have things like a metallic taste in their mouth, or they will get congested, or they'll see visions, they'll see different things, because it's their body trying to process all the stuff that I'm pushing back into their bloodstream. So when we trigger, when we're walking around and something triggers it, and we have a big emotional release of some sort, we get furious. We cry our eyes out. We dive down into a depression. It's really an old buildup of chemicals in our body and pain that's been waiting from all of that inflammation that's now being released. The healthy thing to do when you're triggered is to make sure that you do something to help flush it out of your body. Try not to make it worse. It's very easy when we get triggered to not filter ourselves. And then whoever triggered us, whatever situation made us feel that hurt again, we tend to take it out on them. And it becomes a big dramatic deal, and it spirals down, because then we trigger them, then they trigger us back, and it goes back and forth. And you can really create a lot of messes you have to clean up. One of the things about being an adult is if you break your own window, you're the one who has to fix it and pay to have it fixed and clean up the mess. You're the one who has to do that. So it's best to try to avoid too many big emotional releases if you can, around other people, unless they know what's going on. It's much healthier for your relationships. It's much healthier for you. It'll keep you out of trouble. So when you trigger, the smart thing to do is to take a step back, whether mentally, emotionally, or physically. Take a little bit of a step back and let yourself move that energy. If you can't move it right then, let's say you're in the middle of a meeting. Let's say you're at work. Let's say somebody just came in and said the wrong thing to you, and you need to be professional. What you do is you can always excuse yourself and go to the bathroom. Very few people will deny you having to go to the bathroom. So you excuse yourself, you go to the bathroom, and you let yourself have whatever emotional release you need to have. The other way that you can do that is you can compartmentalize it again, but make sure you take time later on to retouch that and let those feelings release. You also want to make sure you drink a lot of water. You can use lemon water, you can use cucumber water, all those will help detox. You can also use massage in order to help push those things out as well. You know, one of my favorite healing retreats that I had, we did breath work. And while we did breath work, they also pushed on my heart, where I had a lot of stored emotions, a lot of those emotion chemicals there, and a lot of inflammation. And when they pushed on my heart, it was able to push those out of there. It, of course, caused me to have big emotional experiences around it, because suddenly it hurt and there was all this pain. But it was able to finally flush it out of my system, so I didn't take it out on somebody else. I didn't make my life worse. Now, the beautiful thing about letting yourself flush these old emotions out is that on the other side of them, your mind expands. So what happens when you compartmentalize something, when you have an old body memory that's just waiting around, all of these stored chemicals that are waiting around, what's really happening in your body? Well, the first thing that happens is your body is disconnected from it, which means it's not getting the blood circulation, it's not getting the antibodies, it's not getting the nervous system signals, it's not getting the lymph. That part of your body doesn't get healed. It actually stays wounded. It stays physically wounded. It stays irritated because of the inflammation. It never fixes itself, and it starts to get worse because what happens is the cellular waste starts to build up. And if something does happen, when you get, cellular tears or old cells die, they don't have any place to go. So they stay around that trigger point. They stay around where everything was. And so that little area gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it starts to trigger easier. You start to feel it more often for fewer things. So on a physical level, that part of your body doesn't heal. And what that can do is it can start to cause other illnesses. It can start to cause other cellular damage, other problems in your body that that your body isn't normally and naturally healing and fixing itself. The other thing that happens when you have an emotion chemical is you not only physically cut it off, but you also mentally cut it off. So anytime that something reminds you of that, we tend to avoid it. We take our mind and our consciousness and we go someplace else. We'll eat, we will shop, we will take prescription or non-prescription drugs in order to self-medicate. We will do all sorts of things mentally to keep ourselves from reconnecting with that area that's now inflamed and hurting and angry. So we actually end up making our life smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as that area of inflammation, of pain, of emotion chemicals gets bigger and bigger. We start to narrow our world and narrow our lives, and we get fewer and fewer of our needs met. We start to avoid more people. We start to avoid more things. We become less tolerant. We become less compassionate. We become less understanding. We want to avoid more things in our life. And we stop enjoying it as much, because when our life is very small and in a box, then we're not getting our needs met. We're not getting our emotional needs met, connection with people, conversations. We're not learning new information because we're just not tolerant of it. Because mentally, we want to avoid that pain. We want to avoid that painful area of what we're feeling. So our lives become smaller and sadder and less rich. And that's what I would call when we start to spiral down. Now, that emotion kind of acts like a gravitational pull. When we have a trigger, when we're walking along and something has triggered us, and we have all of these emotions coming out, it keeps us in this orbit around it. We can't think outside of that box. We get very narrow tunnel vision. And because we've got that narrow tunnel vision, we aren't solving problems very well. We can't even see our way out of a paper bag. We can't find any solution to any problem, and we end up feeling helpless and lost and scared and anxious and frustrated, where a lot of people are these days, because because they're in that gravitational pull, that awareness, even if they don't feel it consciously, on a subconscious level, of that very painful part of them. And it controls them. You're letting your subconscious, you're letting your body memories and your old pain and your old things control you. And you are losing the ability to problem solve and losing the ability to even think different thoughts. Your thoughts become more obsessive, they become more paranoid. We become easier distracted. We can't focus because we're using all of this mental and physical energy to not feel this area, this trigger area that's built up. So when you let yourself feel these things, and you feel them by just aligning your thoughts with your body, by not ignoring them, by saying, this hurts, I'm in pain, I don't like this, I don't want this. You don't create a story around it. You don't say, I don't like this because, you did this to me and I wish you'd get out of my face and I'm never going to see you again. I mean, although that can be an effective communication tool when you need to make a change. But for your mental and physical health, when you just align your thoughts with how you feel, it allows your body to start flushing it out of there. It brings your consciousness back into it. And on the other side of this, when you're no longer trying to manage, when you're no longer trying to control how you feel, this felt sense, it frees up your mind. It frees up your ability to see solutions and to be creative and to be present. You're exhausting yourself the more things that you avoid feeling, because now you're juggling 20 different balls of things you're not trying to feel or notice. And you only have so much mental and physical energy. And so when you clean those things out, it frees up your ability to engage with life, your ability to tolerate people, your ability to tolerate yourself, your ability to tolerate pain and discomfort, and to tolerate different opinions and different new experiences. Suddenly, your life goes from a tiny little box and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That's what we call spiraling up. So when you let yourself trigger and you give yourself the time and the space to flush all those emotions out of you, either by, as I said, sweating, peeing, crying, so if your preferred choice is to exercise and sweat it out, great. If you want to watch a sad movie and cry it out, perfect. If you just want to pound water and pee, as my husband would say, like a racehorse, that's okay too. You just want to flush all those emotions out. And on the other side of it is wisdom, is understanding. You get out of that little microcosm, that orbit that's been holding you in that one thought pattern. You get out of standby and you're able to get back into the world and fly again. It's a really beautiful feeling. So what I tell people is when you're in that mind state, you're not going to be able to solve anything. You can't solve any problem. Instead, you have to deal with what is actually going on, which is what you're feeling. You deal with what you're feeling, you let yourself process it through, flush it out, and then the answer comes to you, the wisdom comes to you. You've all heard about that. You can't look for something because you won't find it. You have to let things go and surrender, and then the answer comes. That's the science behind surrender. That's the science behind, all those wisdoms that say you can't, reach for something, or when you stop looking, that's when it appears. That's the science behind it. Because when you let yourself relax and be conscious, fully conscious to what's going on with you, it frees up so much more creative, mental, and emotional energy. And you can achieve all of the things that you've been looking for because now you've got the resources to do it. So some people think that I enjoy suffering. They accuse me of, you just enjoy suffering. And actually, I hate suffering. I'm super sensitive. I feel things deeply, and it's really, really uncomfortable for me to feel pain. However, I've had so many experiences in life, and I've done this so often, that I know if I don't feel what's going on with me, it's going to become into a much bigger problem, which will make my life miserable later on. And I really don't want that. I don't want that at all. So instead, if you keep addressing things, if you keep cleaning them up, if you keep bringing your consciousness and also looking for experiences that trigger you, you will suffer on the front end in the short term, but in the long term, you start to become bigger and bigger, and you suffer less and less. That's how you end up finding that inner peace, because you keep clearing those things up. Now, I wanted to make one more note. Now, some people think that body memories come from something that happened to them, and that's not necessarily true, because ideas, beliefs, emotions, and reactions can be handed down family member to family member. So even if nothing happened to you personally, that caused some sort of hurt or trauma that was big and devastating, if something happened to a family member earlier on, then that imprints on the following family member. We learn how to respond and react to life by watching the people around us, and we feel them. And if someone that we're close to or spend a lot of time with continues to react to a certain situation, we will entrain to that, and we will start to react to that situation as well, even when it's really not dangerous, even when it's not something we have to protect ourselves from. That's a learned behavior. It's something that was imprinted on us. We have mirror cells in our brain, and when we watch people around us, those mirror cells react like baby ducklings. And so the people we spend time with, our environment, imprints on our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions. So it can be really confusing for people that they trigger about things that they have no conscious connection to. And that's sometimes why psychotherapy doesn't necessarily work, because it looks to dig out all of your old memories and beliefs. Did you have problems with your father? Did you have problems with your mother? Did you have problems with your sister or brother or grandmother, whatever it is? And you might not have had any problems with anybody, and there's nothing there. And you just keep recycling the same stuff, and people keep assuming and keep pushing on you that something must have happened, something must be deep and dark and hidden. It's not necessarily the case. It could have just been something that happened to somebody else, and it got passed down to you from their behaviors, their actions, their reactions, their subtleties, and you felt that. One of the things to remember is in something like child abuse or sexual abuse or something that's personal like that, what gets imprinted on us is the victimizer's thoughts, feelings, and emotions about the situation, not our own. And if their thoughts, feelings, and emotions were okay, were positive, then whatever experience we had would not have been so negative, wouldn't have been so hurtful and so upsetting to us. Because just think about all the things that happen to kids. Preemies in the hospital and surgeries and broken arms and this and that. When we don't believe this is a stressful situation, then it doesn't become a stressful situation. And so our environment shapes how we look at the world and how we react to the world. So if you're having a trigger, don't naturally assume that it's yours. It could be something that's just been passed down that you're holding. And if you take all the judgmentalism away and you let yourself just be present with it and flush it out, behave as if you took a pill, you took LSD maybe. Just behave as if you took LSD and you had a bad trip. It doesn't mean that you're all screwed up. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't even mean that anything needs to be fixed. You just need to wait it out. You need to flush it out and wait for the drug to go away. Take all of your judgmentalism out of it, and take all of your blame, pointing fingers, and shame out of it too. Stop blaming other people for how you feel, because many times it's that old area, that old wound that we've been protecting and guarding, and it hasn't been able to heal itself. That's what's coming up. And our mind, interestingly enough, will then search around like a predator to try to find some reason, something to blame. Take all of that out of it. Take all of the blame and who's to blame and what's to blame and how do I solve this and whose fault is it and what's my contribution. Take all of those stories out of it and just treat it as if you would if you had a burn on your hand, or a paper cut or something along those lines. You know, don't take it out on anybody else. Do what you need to do to heal the situation, and then notice how you have suddenly, on the other side, freed up wisdom and insight and energy and understanding, and your life becomes bigger and brighter. You know, so that's really, in a big nutshell, what happens when we trigger towards something, and what you can do about it, and the a healthy mindset to have about those emotions. Stop taking them so seriously. And when we stop taking them so seriously, we just treat them as things that need to be treated with kindness and objectivity, as if you were a nurse. Then you're able to go to the other side. So if you have any thoughts, questions, ideas, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll address them in future live streams. So thanks for joining me. If you loved this, go to inspiremassage.com. Sign up for our daily replays, as well as inspirational emails and free membership into the Healership path, because this is going to continue to get bigger. This is a movement, and soon we're going to start doing live streams with more people, and we'll have more engagement, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm excited. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining me. Bye.